Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to the Marketplace. Coming up, Parliament expected to vote tomorrow on 3 amended bills laid before it by government as part of measures to revamp domestic revenue mobilization and also help the country secure an IMF deal. We'll discuss these revenue measures expected to rake in 4 billion cedis annually. Meantime, Ghana Upstream Petroleum Chamber is warning the proposed growth and sustainability levy by government could trigger litigation at the international courts. We'll dig into that. Plus, government reiterates commitment to developing the automotive industry as Volkswagen commissions its assembly plant in Tema.
Natural Resources is working with the Ministry of Trade and Industry around the clock to provide adequate land for multiple free zones across the country to be used as areas for assembly plant expansion.
My name is Daryl Kwawu. Thanks for being with us. Details coming up. Well, that was your look at the currency market. This week, in fact, tomorrow, Parliament is expected to vote on some new tax measures that have been put forward by government to shore up revenue mobilization domestically. And also, as we have been telling you, it's critical in securing an IMF deal. We'll be talking a lot more about that, especially one of them, which the Ghana Upstream Petroleum Chamber has raised concern about, which is a growth and sustainability levy. The chamber says it has the potential to dampen investments. It says that if approved, it will impose a 1% tax on gross production for oil and gas companies and extractive companies, amongst others, as well as a 5% rate on profit before tax on businesses. Joining us is Chief Executive of the Ghana Upstream Petroleum Chamber to explain some more, David Ampofo. Thank you so much for your time. So why are you against this levy?
Well, I think it is important to understand that the industry is going through some challenging times, and we must not underestimate what taxation and excessive or over-taxation can do. There are several levies that have been in the pipeline for some time. This 1% levy on gross production is essentially, it's like an increase in royalty. Okay, so it's not something that you find if you look at a petroleum agreement between a company and the government. There's no provision for that. It's extremely important that we go about these things with a recognition for the agreements we have. So, I mean, I don't even, really, it's not a question of wanting, not wanting to. It's just a question of whether it's even, you know, in the agreement that you have to ensure that you follow the rules. When you have an agreement with companies working in the country, exploring, drilling, looking for oil, risking money and so on, you come to an agreement with them, okay? And government does come to an agreement with them. We're just saying stick to those terms. You know, coming up every now and then with a tax is not the way you do business. I mean, let me ask you, let's assume that you had a landlord that you had an agreement with for a year, and you came to the agreement how much you pay and what they do. Would you be perfectly all right with it if the landlord came after 3 months and wanted to introduce another fee, and after another 2 months? Of course you wouldn't. I suspect you probably wouldn't even give up the place. That is the sort of thing we are talking about. Companies make investments based on some agreements and projections. When you begin to introduce charges here and now and then, And you treat them like they are nothing, but they are something. You say, oh, 1%. 1% on gross production is significant. And by the way, it's also 5% on profit before tax for service companies. These are the ones who will suffer, the Ghanaian service companies. And we speak about this, forgetting them. We as a chamber represent all of them, the international oil companies, the international service companies, and the local service companies. In fact, we have more Ghanaian companies in the chamber than foreign companies. And all these companies rely on work that's going on offshore. There's not much happening. We have not signed any new agreement for the last 6 years. What is there to tax, I ask you? So taxation might be necessary for government and so on, but it has to be, you have to tax where you tax. Maybe government should spread the net far wider, look elsewhere as well. But to just come up and say that, sometimes what I find a little troubling too is, I think it would be useful to sort of engage the parties when you plan to do some of these things, okay, as a minimum. They might have other ideas about how you can raise revenue that they can share with you other than just to be taxed. So it's so important that you understand it, that our worry is that creeping taxes will do damage to an industry that is fragile. We need investment. Oil and gas has potential for us. Let's understand it. I think we don't quite understand it because there seems to be a certain general perception that nothing comes from it, only 10%. All these are factually incorrect. So we are going to spend some time in the coming months, honestly, helping to clarify this, make people help us all understand where we are. The businesses are looking to invest, to put money in here, to explore, to drill and produce. That's what these businesses are good at. We must get them to do that.
Right. So essentially, you're saying that government is breaching petroleum agreements for which you are threatening litigation. Again, just for the benefit of our audience, where exactly is the breach?
Where exactly is?
The breach of the petroleum agreement.
I just told you that there's no 1% gross tax in the petroleum agreement. The agreements don't include these new additions. As I said to you, if you had a tenancy agreement, that's what I meant. That is the breach. The breach is that you have stability clauses with members that stabilize and say that whatever you've agreed should stay stable, because people are plunging 25 years into your country. These are massive investments. They are huge risks. They want stability. That's what I'm saying. They don't want things to be changing every now and then. That is what this tax constitutes.
Yeah, because you'd imagine
an additional sudden burden.
Well, you would imagine that the government would have considered this and would have known that introducing this new levy would be a breach of any agreement they've had with oil exploration firms, right?
Well, let me tell you something. Ultimately, the companies those who feel that they are, as we say now, these things don't fit within their contracts, can easily assert their rights. There's no reason necessarily even to be in a position where that has to happen. That's what I meant by when you engage before, you look at other options. I'm sure government does, but things are tough. So I can understand that they will be looking left, right, center. I'm saying to you, this is certainly a place where you need to do other things, make it grow, expand it, invigorate the sector, let money come in. All those challenges you want will be helped in that way rather than by tax.
Should government engage with the upstream petroleum companies? Do you think that there's a tendency to reach an agreement for which this tax or this levy will pull through?
Listen, I think talking is always helpful. Okay, remember that ultimately, what is good for industry is good for Ghana and vice versa, which is how it should be. Okay, so I think talking is always very helpful. I mean, there might be other ways to support the government's efforts other than this. So yes, there's value to that. In fact, we're seeking to do that, we are engaging at different levels because we think it's important that we convey these concerns and hope that we get some understanding for it. That's really what this is all about at this stage.
And should the government go ahead, you say you're going to litigate this matter?
No, I don't say that. Let's be careful. I don't say they're going to litigate this matter. I said it can open it up. Nobody is saying they'll litigate at this stage because nothing has happened at this stage. So let's see what happens. ultimately, what we are saying is that it would be useful for government. We want government to reconsider this kind of levy at this time. That's where we are at this stage. Let's not speculate. We don't think there's no pleasure in litigating. Understand that there's already quite some litigation happening in the industry, which is a distraction. So don't make a mistake. It's really a distraction. The companies, what they know how to do is produce oil. They should be focused on that rather than focused on legal battles.
Okay, and so we'll watch what happens in Parliament tomorrow. If this tax measure passes, we'll definitely come back to you to get some reaction. Hopefully there's some engagement with upstream petroleum companies. I appreciate your time with us. Chief Executive of the Ghana Upstream Petroleum Chamber, David Ampofo there. So let's bring in Francis Timoboy, who is a tax consultant, to talk a bit about this. Francis, I guess that you were listening to our conversation. Your thoughts?
Yes, so I think I was listening to my senior brother David, and I think he is spot on, because if you look at every long-term agreement, and it happens in the mining sector, it happens in the petroleum sector, there's always a clause which we call the stability clause, and the purpose is to freeze every right and obligation that has been agreed to prevent possible abuse, either a change in state law or normally in a fiscal law like we have in the tax laws. But this growth and sustainability law has been with us since 2001. Unfortunately, when it was introduced, the mining and then the oil companies were not part. It was taken off in 2007, came back in 2009. Then it was taken off in 2011, came back 2013, and since 2013, it's been there on selected companies. This time, we are seeing it coming back in 2023 in the budget. The government says they want to apply 1% on the products of the petroleum and then the mining sector. And that's what I think my brother David spoke about. It's a little problematic. What could have been done was that we may have engaged the companies that, look, this is where we find ourselves. We are in trouble, but then we want this levy stated with specified time when you want to withdraw it. I mean, there are companies, they may decide to accept it, though it is in the contract that you don't have a right, either as a country or as a operator, to change the terms and the conditions of the agreement. But it appears that we never did that engagement. And so for me, I've stated a position that it opens up for possible litigation. If they don't accept it, they may say that you are breaching the contract that they've signed with you. And I think that the earlier we engage them, the better. Maybe they may decide to forgo their rights and accept it and possibly come to rescue the situation in which we find ourselves. But to unilaterally impose it on them because we have the power to impose it, I think it's a sign for them to litigate.
Well, let's talk about the taxes in general. So we have the Income Tax Amendment Bill, we have the Excise Duty Amendment Bill, and the Growth and Sustainability Amendment Bill, which we are just talking about, which are expected to rake in 4 billion cedis annually. The last time the government announced a major tax like the e-levy, they missed the target. How realistic is this projection by the government?
Number one, I don't think it's realistic because we are starting late, and you remember the e-levy was also started late. This one was supposed to have started, let's say, maybe January. As of today, we are now going to debate it, and we are even going to do the engagement. I do not foresee this being achieved. Number two, the banking sector, they are going to contribute massively to this growth and sustainability levy. Let's look at what is happening in the banking sector. Even the one that they are paying now, the National Fiscal Stabilization Levy, they've been heavily affected. And so profits, a lot of banks are going to declare losses. So what is the probability that you're going to get that money? And remember, this tax that we are going to impose is a 5% on the profit of the banks. So apart from the fact that you are starting late, it is unlikely that the economic environment will allow companies to declare profit for you to be able to tax them. I don't think that we can achieve the target that we are expecting. Yes, it may go a long way to help governments raise revenue. And again, it is not only about the banks and the mining sector. Now we have, the government has expanded the base 2.5% on all other companies, which means that every company in Ghana is going to contribute. So to go a long way to help government raise revenue. But because of the late start, and the fact that the banking sector, which normally makes a lot of profit, the debt exchange is going to impact their profitability. I don't think that we may be able to raise that
But we are
revenue.
told these taxes are, should I say, inevitable in the sense that they're crucial for us to secure an IMF deal, and so it's something that the government must do. And so shouldn't the government be getting support to pass these measures?
Look, we need to engage. Everybody wants to help. So people have given up their right to this debt exchange. So possibly the approach that we are taking is what I think that we are not doing well. In the first place, it shouldn't have come in the budget. In some countries, before budget tax policies are announced, we do a lot of engagement with the business community. Here, we didn't do that. So we may see some opposition, even with the oil and gas and mining companies, which profits are normally big. And this time it's even on the production. They may oppose it. That's number one. So there are genuine concerns that the lack of engagement will let people not support this proposal. For the small companies and businesses who are going to pay, let's say, 2.5%, I doubt if they can amass that opposition. But those that we are expecting to get the maximum from, they may oppose it. So it's caused by the lack of engagement. We should have done this even before the budget was presented. We've presented it. Today we are in March, and we are now going to pass the laws. You ask yourself, why is it that those bills were delayed? There were other 3 laws that were passed before January. They were passed on 29 December. Why has these 2 or 3 laws delayed? Because we are not getting the right signal from the business community due to lack of engagement. If people don't support it, it's because they were not told. It sounds like more of imposition.
Yeah, and we've seen businesses already come out to speak about what a burden this would be on them. And so, again, how do we manage it such that businesses are not being done a great disservice, but then the country also benefits, seeing that this IMF program is very important to us?
So the advice could be that government quickly should begin the engagement, sensitization should start, and maybe appeal to the business community. Let the business community understand that this is growth and sustainability levy. Remember, the name used to be the National Fiscal Stabilization Levy to stabilize the economy. So I believe that if government is able to sell this idea to the business community, that if business community works or if things are working better, it's to your benefit. Possibly come up with a sunset clause for this law. It shouldn't be a blanket one. It's been there since 2013. Maybe you tell us that 2023 to maybe 2026 is going to go off, but come and support. I believe that the business community may buy into the idea and support government in these hard times.
All right, we are watching to see what happens tomorrow. We'll definitely link up again. Francis Timoboy, who is a tax consultant, I appreciate your time with us. You're watching The Marketplace. We have some news on producer price inflation and the producer price index, which measures the average change over time in the prices received by domestic producers to produce their goods and services, fell to 50.8% in February 2023 from 52.6% in January. Now, this is in line with the consumer price inflation, which also took a nosedive in February 2023 to 52.8%. The month-on-month change in the PPI between January 2023 and February was 7%. According to figures from the Ghana Statistical Service, the producer price inflation in industry, construction sector decreased to 57.9% in February from 58.8% in January 2023. So we get an idea of what inflation would look like, general inflation, when the Statistical Service makes the announcement for that of February as well. And next, we take you to Tema, where the caretaker Minister of Trade and Industry has commissioned Volkswagen's assembly plant in the Free Zones Enclave. Kwame Yanka has more in this report.
Vehicle manufacturing companies with capacity to produce over 70,000 vehicles to serve the domestic and other markets. Since 2020, Volkswagen VW has assembled 1,000 vehicles under the country's automotive policy, with about 20% of them exported to Cote d'Ivoire, Rwanda, and Kenya. With opening of its facility in Tema, the company takes over from Universal Motors, a licensed importer which assembled 6 models from semi-knockdown kits from South Africa. Caretaker Minister for Trade and Industry, Samuel Jinapor, says the automotive industry and the component manufacturing industry is a key strategic sector globally. The sector is set to stimulate economic growth and transformation and a key driver of skilled employment, investment, local supply chain development, among others.
As the substantive Minister for Land and Natural Resources, I can assure you the government is fully committed to building these integrated industries by adding value to our bauxite and iron ore resources. And the Ministry of Land and Natural Resources is working with the Ministry of Trade and Industry around the clock to provide adequate land for multiple free zones across the country to be used as areas for assembly plant expansions. In addition to this, we are implementing zero rating of value-added tax on the sale of locally assembled vehicles to make these vehicles cheaper by removing VAT on the sale of locally assembled vehicles, even to the end users. We are actively engaging member states of the African Continental Free Trade Area (AFTA) for the rule of origin requirements for trading of vehicles produced on the continent.
Chairperson and Managing Director of VW South Africa, Martina Bean, tells Joy Business that Ghana will be a hub in West Africa.
So we'll see Ghana as our automotive hub in West Africa. We think of a hub and spoke concept for West Africa. We'll do the same again for East Africa and for Southern Africa with our home factory, let's say, in South Africa. In general, the sub-Saharan African business has a very good prospect for us because we see the GDP of the countries growing, the population growing, becoming younger and younger. And will be a huge market for us in the future. We specifically also try to offset export losses we might face from Europe and really venture into Africa with our combustion engine vehicles in the short term, and in the midterm then also, of course, electrifying Africa. So very proud moment for us in this first assembly facility in Ghana for Volkswagen Group Africa.
Great stuff there. Time to talk tech. I'm joined on Zoom by Henry Kobler, who is lead for Eyes of Africa. The story we are following in Nigeria, we've been talking about taxes this afternoon, but in Nigeria, it has announced removal of the proposed 5% excise duty on telecommunication services. And pundits say there are lessons there for Ghana. And so Henry is going to talk to us about it. Henry, let's start with why the government of Nigeria has had to take the decision to remove the 5% excise duty on telecommunication services.
Thank you very much, Daryl. So, generally, if you're looking at the Nigerian enclave, technology has been a big deal. If you're looking at how the digital sector within the Nigerian economy is, trust me, Nigeria has been one of the countries where there's been a lot of funding, venture capital funding, hitting a lot of startups in there. And so you'd realize that the digital economy seems to be booming there. And so, the consumer protection part of Nigeria basically have been taking some level of legal actions to try and take some of the taxes of their digital space economy. And so that is part of the pressure group that has sort of given some leeway for this tax to be taken off the telecommunication part. So that has been a fight that has already been in terms of its legal sector towards the digital economy in Nigeria, and they seem to be having a lot of headways. In Nigeria, there's close to almost about 41 taxes on telecommunication alone and digital economy alone. And so having one of its basically being repelled seems to be a good thing, but I think that there's still a long way to go for them.
Yeah, I read this article on Technova GH where it's trying to make a comparison between Nigeria and Ghana, but these are two different countries with two different situations. Ghana is having to grapple with an economic situation. Of course, Nigeria has an economic situation, but our government feels that taxing telecommunications is a way to make some money because of the profits that the sector is making. Isn't that the right analogy from the perspective of our government?
I think that, sometimes, I think that we've had this discussion here where we really look at how the taxes is impacting the point. Now, if you're looking at Nigeria and you're looking at the venture capital funding alone that is hitting Nigerian startups. That alone is a lot of funding coming into the economy. And so when you're putting taxes on the very basic utilities like telecommunication, data, calls, which comes in for people to be able to explore, use this to sort of build that economy, and you're putting a lot of taxes on it. It basically hinders the the development. It's the same thing with Ghana, because we're always sharing the same point. I mean, when a startup in Nigeria is earning some good venture capital points, it's the same thing that a Ghanaian company was also having. Would have some level of confidence to sort of see my Nigerian brothers are doing it, we can. Now, if I'm producing, I'm putting a lot of services, there are a lot of digital services out there, and then it is very difficult to even have people buy data, to even have access to that, for them to even pay for these services, for the government to even have more money. Then what's the point? How have we seen a very good impact in terms of how these taxes are actually impacting on some of the services within the digital economy, like cyber security? I mean, there have been some justification with we're taking taxes to see cyber security, but as of today, people lose money on mobile money. They have to go through a lot of processes. Have you made the processes seamless? Is there a customer service-based point to solve as simple problems as cyber security? All these taxes are actually on the utility, the very point of access. And they do not even give a lot of impact to exactly what the services that these people are actually offering. And that becomes a very difficult point. It might take but does it develop us? That's the whole point.
Thank you so much, Henry Kobler, Lead Eyes of Africa, for your perspective. And that's the marketplace. More news on our website, myjoyonline.com. We have some new developments there. Fitch upgrades Ghana's rating to CCC. Read more about that, myjoyonline.com/business. We will be back same time tomorrow.